Okay. Can't hear myself. I have to restart OBS. Give me a tick. Good. Okay, we should be going straight into a stream right now. Apologies for the small technical difficulties. And making myself a bit off center. Yeah, very nice. Welcome to another stream of Lyrebird Edits. Thank you for hanging around while I deal with the wonder that is an Australian internet connection and a second monitor that refused to work. I'm good. How's it going, OutriderSG? Welcome to the stream. Welcome, welcome. Yeah, I'm going well. I was thinking to myself how much I missed last stream. I took the Sunday off to do some family things, and I realized on Monday I was like, oh, I should get back to editing soon. Like it sort of built up inside of me, like I had a craving. So yeah, I was really looking forward to doing tonight's stream. Yes, yes, we are. We're up and running. Sayaka. Hey Ollie T, hello, welcome back. Papa Liar. Well, thank you for being patient with me. It's sometimes a bit of a struggle getting the stream up. I think that's the yeah, that the hardest part of editing is opening OBS and dealing with Windows updating. So I'm streaming through my phone, and it's like I'm sure I can think of some clever metaphor to describe this. My internet connection at home is very throttled, and so often Windows Update it doesn't seem to even kick in. But then when I'm on my phone, it will, and it will hog as much bandwidth as it possibly can while it downloads all the updates that it should have been downloading if I lived in a country that had like standard internet connection. But yeah. Yep, the internet's bad here. It'll get better one day. One day. One day. Until then, we've got 4G on our phones, so it's all good. I managed to troll another Twitch rider with Shrek. I don't know how I feel about this. I feel like I should have been there to take the bullet for that other Twitch rider. That poor Twitch rider. No one deserves to be trolled with Shrek. Hey, Clem. How are you? Good to see you. Just before I get started, I'm gonna turn that light off. This one. I always forget to turn it off. Give me a sec. Always. Why do I forget? Because I always forget that when you turn off that ceiling light, I'm all blurry. Hey, I'm sharp. When you turn off that ceiling light, the camera just boosts its gain. Although now I see like vertical wavy bars. Hope it's not too dark. I think it's right. Yeah, if that's like I can see like my footage, my square is sort of got these weird, almost like a refresh flickering in the background there. If that's annoying, then let me turn the other light back on. Otherwise, yeah, we'll go and deal with it. Working, work never ending. Yes, this is a Destructive Readers post. So we have OutriderSG who is joining us tonight, and this is OutriderSG's story called The Wanderer's Legacy. Yes, which I picked up from Destructive Readers, which is a really good place to pick up stories from. Yeah, there's always a lot of really quality stories floating around, which is good. Alrighty, let me just double check something. Good. If at any point in the stream the quality starts to dip, let me know immediately in the comments here, and I will rush to my task manager and disable Windows Update. Oh my goodness. Let's kick off with the edit. Let's do this. Let's dive right in after we bump up to 150. I think that's nice. Now, wonder why it's off center a little bit. There are no comments. Oh, isn't that funny? View. Oh, okay. Usually it's only like this if there's like a comment pasted somewhere on the... Anyway, so OutriderSG, I'll be editing or suggesting into the document that you linked through the destructive readers. So this is, I think, your copy. If you'd like me to work on my own copy and send it to you as a link after, let me know now. I've saved it into my own drive as well. But if you want to keep it clean, so for instance, if you want someone else to look at this document and to see a version of it without my comments, just let me know. Because it'll get very messy. I tend to go very line by line. Hey, Rufus. Oh, love you too, Rufus. Oh, how embarrassing. Ah, you're gonna inflate my ego with that. Thank you, thank you. I like this little pep talk. You should be asleep. It's 9:30. But I'm very glad you came on to say hello. That means a lot to me. Thank you. Oh good, you got backups, nice. Your copy is fine. Good, okay. Well, without further ado, let's jump in. Let's jump in. Rufus, you should definitely be asleep. Okay. Why don't we make a start on the story? I can't change the line spacing, but anyway, that's okay. So we start off with a prologue. Julia's plan to visit her brother was fucking everything up. Rufus, you should go. There are rude words here. You shouldn't be watching this. There was a bad time for Aiden. Sorry, this was a bad time for Aiden to be skipping town. The trip would be long, a day, maybe more. And for what? To get blackout drunk and wind up half naked in a boat in the middle of a lake? Again, he winced, remembering how the sun had seared his sandy skin. Nope. On top of that, his clients were threatening to back out of a deal that could really save his ass. The bastards were notoriously difficult to pin down. Hotheads, easily offended. A few days was all he needed, and they'd be right back at the table. But Julia was Julia about it. Packing the car with plenty of food and drinks was the easy part. Listening to her mum along to songs from her bad bitch playlist. Murder. She laughed as she tallied the supplies, joked that Aiden might as well keep a go bag in the back, like the people from those survival prep shows she was obsessed with. He smirked, pointing out that he might have forgotten Chloe's medication if Julia wasn't there to remind him every 10 minutes, without fail. It was midday when they set out, but the sun was well beyond the mountains when the world fell apart. Whoa, that is a typo. Look at, wow, that's like a cluster of an autocorrect. Look at that. That's very impressive. Just give me one sec, guys. Sorry. Good. So an enormous streak of infernal red light ripped through the clouds, cracking as it soared, alive with swirls of golden radiance. The concrete of the freeway melted as it crashed, its raw power setting the earth to tremble. Out of the massive crater ascended a column of fire that split the overpass in two, then a million. A wall of shrapnel raced outward in a circle, a flak akin to javelins piercing through glass and steel and flesh. Aiden could only watch as the shockwave raised the earth before him, sending cars and trucks and everything else skyward, scattered like leaves upon the breeze. Others died outright, shredded to pieces by debris or melted by the wave of heat that rolled out in all directions. The stench of it hurried through the air, a stink of molten bone and sinew. One car flipped over another, only to land upright again before cleaving down the middle, its occupant rendered to the wind. Aiden scarcely dodged a similar fate before the shockwave reached their car. The roaring squall tumbled over them, dispersed enough by then to merely send them swerving off the road straight into an empty field beside the freeway. I'll read up to here, and then we can comment on the first scene. The car buckled, wild and violent, as it ploughed through the tall grass and slammed into the trunk of a towering pine. Groggy, Aiden leaned toward Julia. "Babe," he said, no reply. She laid unconscious, still breathing, a gash tracing the contour of her temple. Her dried blood sparkled ruby against her amber skin. "Chloe," he reached back to her car seat, tilting it forward to study her. She glanced up with hazel eyes, staring back at him. They matched her mother's, flecked with gold and sparkle. She looked confused, but otherwise unharmed. His wife came to as Aiden pulled her from the car. The sky was alight, raining doom as far as the eye could see. He fished Chloe out next, and handed her to Julia, his eyes drifting toward the horizon, awestruck and exhausted. A second streak broke through the atmosphere, then another. They were further away than the first, but each new impact was closer than the last. That was their cue. They ran full sprint, their lungs on fire as they raced from the scene. Okay, let me have a little think, just for a couple of seconds, about how this all fits together. Alrighty, so in this scene we've got, I suppose, a bit of an introductory encounter with an undefined object that's rained from the sky and plonked itself down in the middle of a highway. At least I think it's a highway. That's my guess. Causing Aiden to crash his car. Wife and kid are fine, and they get out and run. So that's the sort of drive here. The way it's narrated is highway, freeway. Yep, cool. So the way it's narrated is you've got this narrator who is, I suppose, declaring the order of events of the story. So rather than have the scene organically developed, so for example, Aiden kept his eyes on the highway as he drove 80 miles an hour along the median. I know that's not a thing. He looked to his wife, she's there, kids in the back seat. He had to bite his lip and not curse out loud at the thought of skipping town to meet up with his brother. The last thing he needed was to etc, etc, etc. Instead, we've got it sort of reversed a little bit. This is my narrative reversal. Instead of having the narrator focalize heavily through Aiden, they're kind of on top of Aiden, declaring the facts around the scene. And we see this in these declarative statements. Julia's plan to visit her brother was fucking everything up. This was a bad time for Aiden to be skipping town. The town would be long, a day. So the trip would be long, a day, maybe more. And for what? To get drunk? No thank you. On top of that, his clients were threatening. So in this scene here, we haven't got we haven't got an establishment of scene. What we have is instead an establishment of the concept of what's going on. And it's a bit of an unusual way to start a story. Usually, you want to soften the landing into your world. You want to establish where the scene is taking place, establish who the characters are, how they're interacting, and then, depending on how it's focalized, you can then start to drip these statements in about the clients. And the fact that he's going to see his brother. Ooh, what happened there? Green text and a blue background. Ugh. No, I just no. What am I doing? Help me! Somebody suggest a good color. One that's not awful. There we go. Thank you. There are two elements within this opening paragraph here that establish, I suppose, a bit of an emotional core. I don't want to go and see my brother, and on top of it all, I have to worry about work. Now, these two elements here are, I suppose, declared to the reader. Instead of having Aiden in a car thinking to himself that this is the case, it kind of happens in an event that precedes the narrative. They review your story. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, you mentioned over Discord. Vomit pink. Yeah, you mentioned over Discord. That's pretty cool. So, was it like a review stream or an editing stream? Yeah, what was going on there? That sounds pretty cool. Let's turn that volume down so I'm not shouting in my own ear. What this does to a story and how it predisposes your reader to perceive the events is that the first impression you have of a story isn't where the characters are or who they are. It's just a bit of a nebulous idea about two of their motives. It's not that you shouldn't start a story this way, but it's that this first scene here, if you had to condense it down into a single sentence, is, I'm taking a guess, aliens arrive, because I haven't read through your story, by the way, OutriderSG. I like to have it fresh when I edit. An alien thing crashes from the sky and nearly kills main character who was on his way to his brother's. That's the gist of this scene. Ah, interesting. Okay, yeah. That's good to know because that will it will sort of temper how the narrator works with the events of the story. We've had a bit of a chat before in previous streams about the roles of prologue and I suppose how in modern writing it's fallen out of favor. Usually what people will suggest is to just start it at chapter 1. However, I can't, like, I prefer it that way myself personally, but as an editor I think I'm a bit sort of agnostic about the roles of prologues, unless I'm really familiar with how your story works, in which case I might suggest, you know, prologue does or doesn't work. As a general rule of thumb, we've all agreed before that prologues are usually a bit redundant, but that doesn't mean that they can't be done effectively. So I'll push all of that aside and just say that, like, I'll deal with what's in front of my eyes here and just take this as is. Yeah. I guess it is what it is, it's just a structural thing. But keeping that in mind, if you'd like to keep this multi-narrative point of view in your later chapters, then this first prologue here will function a bit differently. So in which case, we've got more of Aiden and Julia's perspective. I'm just doing a very quick scroll here to see if I can see anything more about Aiden and Julia, Aiden and Julia, Aiden and Julia. So this is all Aiden and Julia. We don't break characters within the first chapter or the prologue. Okay. Okay, motivations, cool. How many characters do you introduce in your prologue, Outrider? Is it just Aiden, Julia? I mean, there's the girl as well. Hazel? No, Hazel Eyes. The child's name was Chloe. Sorry, Chloe, Aiden, and Julia. Cool. So in which case, let's read through it again, and I'll take it paragraph by paragraph or maybe sort of section by section. Julia's plan to visit her brother was fucking everything up. It's a good line. I like that as an opener. This was a bad time for Aiden to be skipping town. Sure, it would be long, a day, maybe more, and for what? I think we don't need it to be a new paragraph because it's not a separate notion. It all links together. It looks nice to have your first line as its own line, but it doesn't strictly need to be. That's a 50-50 suggestion. You can take it or leave it. It functions fine as a separate paragraph, but doesn't really matter either way. To get blackout drunk and wind up half naked in a boat in the middle of the lake. Again, he winced remembering how the sun had seared his sandy skin. Nope. On top of that, his clients were threatening to back out of a deal that could really save his ass. The bastards were notoriously difficult to pin down. Hotheads easily offended. A few days was all he needed and they'd be right back at the table. But Julia was Julia about it. Packing the car with plenty of food and drinks was the easy part. Listening to her hum along to songs from her bad bitch playlist, Murder. She laughed as she tallied the supplies. Joked that Aiden might as well keep a go bag in the back like the people from those survival prep shows she was obsessed with. He smoked, pointing out that he might have forgotten Chloe's ear medication if Julia wasn't there to remind him every 10 minutes without fail. She laughed as she tallied the supplies, comma, joked that Aiden, or joking that Aiden. This is a run-on sentence here, so full stop, joked that Aiden might as well keep a go bag is run-on from the previous sentence, and I don't think it's justified in this case. I'll declare outright again, for those who don't know, that I love run-on sentences. I think they're just wonderful, but you have to use them right. And sometimes I think that if you don't have a justification to run on a sentence, like improving the flow of the story, keeping the pace high, or running two ideas together over a pause, like if it can be replaced by a comma and an ing, or another sort of smooth way to look at it, then I think that's probably a little stronger here. Oh, introduce the narrator. Interesting. Okay, cool. I feel like I have my finger on the pulse of the narrator's voice a bit more. A lot of what happens here is outright told to us as readers. She laughed, she tallied supplies, she joked that Aiden may as well keep a go bag, like the survival preppers. He smoked, pointing out that he might have forgotten Chloe's medication if she wasn't there to run 10 minutes without fail. So there are two segments here that the narrator is telling you. If the narrator wanted to show you this detail, you could easily break it down into several lines of dialogue. Let's push on a little bit, and then I can talk about this as a whole. It was midday when they set out, but the sun was well beyond the mountains when the world fell apart. An enormous streak of infernal red light ripped through the clouds, cracking as it soared. So, This is the first live thing that happens in your story, I'd say. This is character thought, motives. Here are things that have happened. They pack the car is what really happens in this chunk here. But it's nice that we get the different character reflections on it. It was midday when they set out, and the sun was well behind the mountains when the world fell apart, which is quite like it's a nice sort of linker. An enormous streak of infernal red light ripped through the clouds, cracking as it soared. This here is the first point in the story where the narrator actually comes in and goes, okay, here we are. The first thing that happens in this story is an enormous streak of infernal red light ripped through the clouds. The clouds, not the crowds. But because the narrator has spent so much time declaring facts to you as a reader, we don't really get too much of a sense of location. That's one thing that I think this section up here is missing. I don't know where anything is. I don't know if they're in North America or if they're driving across, I don't know, like the tundra in Canada, or if they're in the middle of Botswana. I don't know. Probably not because of the Bad Bitch playlist. That sounds, you know, firmly North American. But there's nothing in this story to indicate where it is. I don't know what the character's experience on the ground is. There's no description of what the car's like. Is it packed to the brim? Is it rickety as it goes along the road? How many people are around them on this highway as this happens? That's a very important detail to slip in, because I don't know what the significance of... No, that's not quite right. Let me rephrase this. When you read a sentence like this, a wall of shrapnel raced outwards in a circle, the flak akin to javelins piercing through glass and steel and flesh. I don't remember reading that. Aiden could only watch as the shockwave raised the earth before him, sending cars and trucks and everything else skyward, scattered like leaves upon the breeze. That's fine, but I wasn't aware that they were even on a very busy highway in the middle of traffic with cars to scatter. I sort of feel like as a reader, I'm on a train, but there's no track anywhere. I can't project I can't project forward into the story. It's as though there's an engineer in the front of a train who's laying down fresh train track as the train carves its path through the story. And in that case, I don't know anything about where we're going, or even what color the train is. Let me make a more firm suggestion about what I think can clear up all of these nebulous questions that I have about the story, I guess. Mm, 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 mm. Yep. Oh, sorry, that's Psycho, so OutriderSG. My thing was to get the setup of, Yeah, I think Psych is taking the words out of my mouth there, which is good for me. Like Psycho says, if I want to insert the feedback I got, I have to rewrite the whole scene, and sometimes that's necessary here. So the downside of getting the setup out of the way quickly is if it doesn't feel like it's justified to write about, then... So for example, if we get rid of all of this, for instance, like, let me just illustrate a point here. If we get rid of this sentence, all of these sentences here, and we start the story, it was midday when they set out, but the sun was well beyond the mountains when the world fell apart. An enormous streak of infernal red, blah 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 blah, and everything happens here. Now, it's a more exciting place to start the story, but we haven't got the actors in place, do we? And I understand that this is sort of like, let me introduce the actors. Instead of introducing the actors, we've just got their motives or their thoughts about things like work is stressful, but the question is, do we need work is stressful? I don't want to see my brother. Hmm. Hmm. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. You feel like it's the weakest part of this prologue. Um. Yeah, just reiterating what Sayaka said here, and I often say this through lots of my streams, but everything is just suggestions from my point of view. I certainly don't want to declare that there's only one way to craft a prologue, to craft an opening scene. So, yeah, take everything I say with your judgment in focus too. You have a sense as well of what is weak in the story and how it all fits together. Let me try and think of how this would work if you were to focalize the story a little closer into the characters. Instead of having your narrator up here as like a giant noodle monster with cameras for eyes, as your narrator and all the people down here, if you bring the camera, the focus of the story, the narrative understanding of the characters a bit closer into the characters, you can rewrite this so that it doesn't feel like it's info dumping, and that it's more integral to how the characters function with each other. So for example, let's start here. Cool. Excellent. There are some suggestions that, as much as we like to to say, you know, there are no stupid ideas. There are no bad things you can suggest. Oh, there are bad things you could suggest. I mean, I won't point and highlight anything that may or may not be a bad suggestion. You know, like say hypothetically putting Shrek into your prologue. But yeah, you know, he's gonna be a cameo. This is my swamp. Okay, so um this is all flexible writing, what I've just done. I don't mean for this to be in any way indicative of the type of word choices you should use or the ideas you should use. It's just vomit from me. But what I was trying to do was incorporate elements of what I'd seen up here in a way that echoed the sentiments while at the same time provided filling around what was going to be the lead up to your big inciting incident. If you do it this way, it doesn't feel like you're just hurrying to get somewhere. It's a quiet, slow moment before the catastrophe that does a couple of things. It introduces the characters in relation to each other. It introduces where they are, the setting that they're in, the purpose of their movement, and it does so in such a way that doesn't rely on the narrator crafting clever backstatements, but instead demonstrates the same things through a sort of forward rush. Just to reiterate, all of this is neither here nor there. If you like the words, great. If you don't, also totally fine. But I think what I'm trying to do here is synthesize these elements in a way that doesn't feel like it's rushing, and instead feels like it's grounding the scene. So consider this. Hours of Gridlock wasn't exactly what Aiden had in mind when his brother invited him to come and get blind drunk for the weekend. Hardly the time or place for it either, considering his brother had practically forced him to bring the family along. Aiden drummed his fingers along the steering wheel and peered out at the interstate, today blocked with the even orderliness of cars, all stacked like sugar cubes glued to asphalt. This is ugly. I apologize, but even orderliness. What was I thinking? Block with the even... Block with even lines. That's much better. To make matters worse, Julia had brought her Bad Bitch playlist and was currently blasting some high-quality Nicki Minaj from the speakers. Christ almighty. Aiden turned and spied Chloe in the review mirror, her focus and hearing solely drawn to the world of her iPad, 40 Silver Edition. At least one edition was spared from Jewelry Pop. Oh, cool. Yes. That's what we want. An enthusiastic rewriter. Yeah, excellent. No, that's really good. I think a lot of people find rewriting daunting. But if you can make yourself enthusiastic about it, then that's fantastic. Like, it's really good. Because it's hard to motivate yourself to do rewriting. Sometimes. Really depends. If you know you have a structural problem with how things are, it can be a bit daunting sometimes. Brackets. Which one? Oh, this one here, like the 499 Silver Edition? No, that's me. That's me playing a joke. Brackets. Yeah, I don't recommend putting brackets in. Very specific circumstances can warrant brackets, but you need to pick your battles with that. Ah, okay. I received an overwhelming amount of recommendations to go further back to when the word fell apart. Good. Some said even go back further before it kicks off. If you want to, Yeah, I think you've got to consider the purpose of this prologue. If it's an introduction to a multi-point of view narrative, having a central character witness the catastrophic event and then having the story skip forward in time to X years later, and then it just pushes off from there. Have you seen a movie called A Quiet Place? It was in the cinemas recently, and I loved it. I thought it was great. A Quiet Place starts 300 days after the aliens arrive, and it never once goes back to introduce the aliens. It's an anti-prologue story in that it starts when it starts, And is there a time skip? Yeah, there is. There's a little time skip. A little time skip. Okay. Uh, I mean, if you've got a night off, definitely recommend the movie. Because it's an interesting way to structure a story in which you have like catastrophic alien event here, but then the movie's way over here, and it pushes out that way. And it never once looks back. Um, I think that's the best way to do these types of stories. I think there's very little that alien introductions. Oh, I mean, I can't say that for certain, but unless there's something very exciting or very monumentous about the arrival of the aliens, you could start the story when you originally started it. However, if you do want to flesh out these characters and you think that they're important and their story is important, you're more than welcome to, I suppose, just pick a point at which you think it's important to start. The earlier you start away from the inciting incident, the more breathing room you have to introduce character traits, motives, what they're doing. But it's difficult to say without a solid plan or an idea of what your story is. All I can do as an editor, me right now, is just look at what I have in front of me. Right. And I think Sayaka's going to touch on what I've just been saying too. That was called A Quiet Place, Liberto114. Welcome back to the stream, by the way. A Quiet Place. The aliens sense humans by the sounds they make, so almost all of the movie is very quiet. It's really fun to watch because it's so still and calm until it's not. It's a very good movie. Interesting. Which in turn affects Chloe. Do you mean in terms of nah. Does the inciting incident change Aiden from Aiden A into Aiden B? And if so, it's good to have an understanding of what Aiden's like before that happens. I think A Quiet Place is super quiet relative to my stream. I talk so much on my stream. Yes, in that case, after this prologue, do we see Aiden, Julia, and Chloe again? Do we get scenes focalized through them? The answer to that question will help us here determine where a good place to start is. Brings less desirable traits to the fore. Interesting. Yes. Okay. Interesting. I've got an idea brewing, but let me go grab some water because I'm thirsty. So back in 1 minute. Okay, I'm back. Yeah, so that's a good observation, Sayaka. Which is something I was going to sort of get into immediately after I was finished talking about this little section here. There is a very sharp point at which almost sort of we have a very quiet character motivation driven opening, and then pretty much all of a sudden, hey, and then everything starts to go to shit really quickly. That can be done if the narration is very sort of cold and aloof. As if your narrator is just describing facts like the citizens of Earth were unaware of the calamity that was about to befall them. The aliens came and you know, it was North America and then South America and everyone died. That's sort of like the day after tomorrow style of narration where you have to describe things on a very grand scale. But because we're talking about two people here and their daughter Chloe, it is a very quick sort of transition and maybe a little stumbling. Let's come to that. Okay, I think I'm back up. Tell me if I am. Ah, tasty meme. Good, excellent, back. Very nice. Don't know what happened there. I had internet. OBS just decided to not cooperate. At this time of day, at this time of year. Ah, fresh. Very fresh. What we're talking about just before I so very rudely cut out. Without going too deep into what the story's about here, I sort of feel like I'm not sure if a prologue is maybe the best way to approach the start of the story. What you set up here is interesting, OutriderSG. I'll just read it out again because it's beyond the stream block here. That's the trick with prologue, right? You bait the reader with enough to make them go, oh, okay, but not revealing anything about where the story actually goes. I found that as a reader, I'm never satisfied with that as an opening to a story. I remember very clearly there's a book on my shelf here that I've refused to read because the prologue was a bait. It was ooh, exciting stuff is happening, wow. And then it was like, okay, chapter 1, 3 days earlier. And then it was just back in the same high school where they were doing high school things and everything was normal. It was a fantasy high school. And then about 3 chapters into the story, maybe page 70, the characters had met up with the events of the prologue, and then they just pushed forward. I felt like I was kind of cheated. like the author was like, ooh, exciting stuff. Okay, now bear with me. These next 3 chapters are boring, but I promise you it's gonna get good. And ever since I've read that story, I've kind of been a bit like wary of people who bait and switch, so to speak. That's not a personal indictment against you, OutriderSG. I think it's just more like a sort of preference of what I want as a story. I want somebody who has the confidence to say from the first sentence, this is a bit slow right now, but bear with me because there's a reason why we're starting here. I think that kind of honest slowness to a story does absolute wonders, because if you pull it off, it's emotionally rewarding. Rather than giving your reader the impression that you need to trick them. I know that's not what anyone really wants to do, consciously, when they write a prologue, but I think oftentimes that's kind of the effect of it. You're more than welcome to disagree. If you feel like the prologue is a good structure for how you want to introduce the elements of the start of your story, feel free. Like I'm really keen to see if someone can do it in such a way that it provides a solid ground for the story. I guess. What's my favorite prologue? Aragon. Yeah, Aragon. Let me think. 12 years ago, Aragon. The prologue to Aragon was a small scene in which one of the main villains is going around casting magic and destroying a village, and he ends up being the main villain against Aragon. It's like, who's the main character in Aragon? It's Aragon. That felt like a prologue that was okay, and it wasn't because it was like important event that you need to understand. Okay, slow bit of a story, slow bit. Now we're ramping up. It didn't feel like that. Anyway, that's my kind of vent here about what can work in terms of a prologue. I'm sorry I haven't really been doing much line editing. I sort of feel like we need a bit of a grip on the story before we go a little forward. Yeah, movies pull off the prologue a bit better, don't they? Books, I'm not sure though. Yeah. Tell you what, there are lots of things I can suggest here on a line by line basis about how the writing is. Like the transition here is a little too sharp between inaction and action. I think most of the sentences are pretty good. I mean, I could do line edits of this, but what I think might be a little better is if I just push forward a bit more and understand where the story's going with this prologue, and then I can kind of go back up and do a bit more line editing, but maybe that would be the most beneficial thing I could do. That's a good point, Sayaka. Yeah, we were editing your story, and you're right. The opening scene isn't all that. Okay, whatever you think would be most helpful. Cool. Your opening scene wasn't all that sexy, was it? Like, it wasn't the most nail-bitingly thrilling opening, but it had something that I like in the openings of stories, and it's a confidence to begin where it feels like it should begin. And you're right, you stick with it, and you, having read the slower parts, you build up the appreciation more and more as it goes on. My phone's gonna run out of battery. Let me go get a charger. Because if I run out of battery, I'll have to use my awful home internet. Woe is me. Ah, this should be fine. Good. I don't think the stream is suffering. Good. Very nice. Okay. I want to push forward a little more, and then I'll go back and do some line by line stuff, just so I can give you a bit more of a feel of where the prologue's going. Yay! Good. Yeah, people often find that they like to go back through their own edits and just watch it again, just pick up on things they may have missed the first time. I have a YouTube channel, by the way, which I think I have a link to on my Twitch page. That's got all the backup videos. Otherwise, I have a Discord as well, but you already know that, OutriderSG. If anyone's lurking and they haven't joined my Discord, please join my Discord, and you can lurk there as well. Oh wow, nice. Thank you, Sayaka. Shameless YouTube plugs, yeah, exactly. Nothing like a shameless YouTube plug. We've been down here too long, Aiden, Julia said, pacing around the room. The basement of the auto shop grew cool with the fading light. I know, Jules. He could still hear the thumping persisting in the distance even now. Julia had been at this for the better part of an hour. Aiden estimated. The thick dust that settled on the cold concrete floor paved in her wake, like trampled snow. Does she feel warmer to you? Does she feel warmer to you? What do you want to do, Jules? Aiden asked, his eyes tracing her as she stomped about. We can't go back up. There's nothing down here. Fucking nothing. She halted in her tracks. We can't stay in this basement forever, I know. Julia waved to the ceiling. It's been 2 days, Aiden. You're right, okay? What do you want me to say? That hammering was relentless, unforgiving. There was no pattern to it, no getting used to its sinister ruination. A hell drum without rhythm or cadence. Something, anything, I don't know, Julia said, waving her hand back and forth. Are we really going to spend another night trapped in this tomb? Remember a few years back, Hayden asked, our last trip to your brother's, ended up stuck in his spare room for 3 days. Yeah, I mean, it was technically 2 days. Her voice had a welcome ease to it. Remember we heard Mason banging little Missy, little Missy yoga pants. Checked into that hotel on the last night. Aiden reached out to brush the hair from Julie's face, gently tucking the chocolate strands behind her ear. Every so often the distant pounding would unsettle debris from the ceiling. It was a trivial thing, but Aiden... there was another point here, I should stick in a word. Shoot. It was a trivial thing, but Aiden could tell that it was bothering her. She reached up, her hand behind his neck, and nudged his forehead against hers. They lingered, leaning, listening. He skimmed her cheek with his thumb and ran it across the subtle bronze of her bottom lip. She tilted her head back, allowed his lips to fall against hers, and Aiden felt his worries drift away. That's right, Aiden said, the ghost of a smile on his face. Yoga pants. I forgot all about her. Aha, Julia said. I'm sure you have. Chloe was cooing, but remained otherwise quiet. She's a baby, okay. It was as though she understood they needed that moment. Aiden pressed the back of his hand to her forehead, definitely warmer. Worse, right? Julia asked, the calm gone from her voice. She needs her medicine. Oh, we already tried that, Jules, Aiden said, pointing toward the bedlam in the distance. Those things swooped in so damn quick. If it weren't for the cover of the trees, we'd be dead. Chloe would be dead. I know, it's hell out there, he said. What if they catch us out in the open? She was right, though. They couldn't stay. He stared off into the distance through a tiny window. A storm of lightning crackled across the evening sky, darting, buzzing, a swarm of angry red bolts. Aiden! His eyes found hers. She was staring him down, awaiting a response to a question that had been allowed to go unanswered. Babe, her tone shifted low, calm and polite, more dismissive than anything else. You know what? Fine. But we go first thing in the morning. There'd be no stopping her, he knew. Never mind the fact that it would put his wife and daughter in harm's way. He felt the chill of her stare. Okay, first thing, he said. For now, let's try to get some sleep. Chloe continued to fidget as Julia slumped onto a stack of pellets. She was wearing Aiden's jacket, his scent imbued in its navy blue fibres, which Chloe was fond of. She bundled Chloe into it with her. Julia loved that jacket too. She brought it a few years earlier, her way of smoothing over an argument they'd had. He wore it ever since. Aiden would joke that Julia loved the jacket more than him. She never set him straight. It was a small comfort, the only thing that they managed to grab when they fled the car. It had been a few weeks since winter gave way to spring. Even so, the basement approached freezing at night, and the power in the shop stopped working straight away. Julia slid over to the makeshift bed and laid down, Chloe in her arms. Aiden followed suit, hugging them both from behind. A draft rolled over them. Huddled together in the darkness, they listened. He could feel Julia's breaths quicken and her body shudder. She was whimpering, cold and nervous. He squeezed her arm. What are we going to do, Aiden? She asked. We'll think of something. He said it was a royal... But one thought kept bubbling to the surface. Aiden couldn't help himself. Hey, you don't own a pair of yoga pants, do you? He asked. I feel like we've given them a bad rap. Julia swatted him on the arm, then rested her head into the crook of her elbow and sniffed. I do. He held her tight to his chest, kissed her on the shoulder, then on the neck. She turned back to him and nuzzled against his chin, urging his mouth towards hers. She nibbled on his lip, the tiniest pinch. She tasted of vanilla and sweat. He loved it. Okay, I'm going to stop there. So in this scene here, we've got something that's a lot more relational. It deals with events as they happen through character dialogue. If you were to condense that down into a sentence, it would just be they make a decision as to what to do tomorrow. But there's a lot of nuance there. There's memory, there's humor, there's anxiety, there's communication. Let me think about that for just a tick. Lee Everett with the YouTube quality comment. Like and subscribe. Except you're already subscribed. Smash that like button. Which word did you make up? Oh, poop burger. Or was it a different word? Hmm. It's a good suggestion, the real Sayaka. There are a couple places here that you can replace the telling of detail with showing, as real Sayaka was mentioning. I'll pick a few and we can go through them. Oh, hell drum. It's a great word. I love it. It's one of those made up words that it's so intuitive what it means that it just works. It's really nice. I love it when people do this. So yeah, well done. Really good to see. There's another point I thought of. A couple of points here where you could weave this in. Julia loved that jacket too. Is something that you can demonstrate with a subtle action. So she was wearing Waiden's jacket. He said imbued in its navy blue vibes, which Chloe was fond of. She bundled Chloe into it with her. You could even, in the way that you describe it, into it with her. So she bundled Chloe into it, into the folds. I was going to say wrapping up her love with love, but that's a bit redundant. Sometimes you can very subtly imply emotional elements with just the words you use to describe something. She bundled Chloe into the folds, wrapping her up tight and warm. Or you can just say wrapping her tight and warm, up tight and warm. It's fine. Julia loved that jacket too. Is something that I think, from the way that this is described, it kind of just runs into itself. Especially because this is a really interesting way of telling that detail, but it's run together in such a way that I really like how controlled the narration is here. So you can just outright get rid of Julia loved that jacket too, and replace it with this, which leads into what you already had here. She bundled Chloe into the folds, wrapping her up tight and warm. She brought that jacket a few years earlier, her way of smoothing over an argument that had. I'm gonna post it with a hyphen. He'd worn it almost every day since. Aiden would joke that Julia loved that jacket more than him. She never set him straight. This tells you exactly the same thing as Julia loved that jacket too. I always say that there are two ways you can show... Well, I don't always say this. It's a bit of an exaggeration on my part. There are a couple of points where I'm sure you're familiar with the show versus tell spectrum that people talk about. People often say that it's better to show your detail rather than tell it, and I agree, that's mostly the case. You can actually tell, however, you can tell detail in such a way that it's so smooth that it feels like it's showing you something. This is one of those examples where we're told detail, but the really sort of microcosmal nature of this little story here, it's like a micro story, and it works for me, and I really like it. So You don't always have to show your details. Sometimes you can tell us a little story and it functions in the same way. I don't know. Let me go back and read these comments, sorry. MacGuffin, but not magical. Hmm. I think so. Like this is in response to I don't feel like it's being over described. I feel like there's an emotional attachment that we're being shown here. Cool. Yep. Nice. Hmm. That's an interesting quote that Sayaka's got there. Hmm. And I feel you with knowing what is and isn't the right distance to have over your story and how it all works together. Um, hmm. There's something else we need to talk about here between the first scene and what goes on between the stars. Now, they sprint and then immediately we find themselves in a basement. We don't know exactly how much time has passed until the characters talk to each other, which is good. There was a point here at which I'm just trying to find it. Why don't I just go through this and do a bit of line editing, and I'll find the point that I was thinking of. There's a point at which Aiden's looking out the window and his experience triggers the narrator to talk about the events that happened between A and B. We've been out here too long, Aiden, Julia said, pacing around the room. The basement of the auto shop grew cool with the fading light. I know, Jules. He could still hear the thumping persisting of a distance even now. Julia had been at this for the better part of an hour, Aiden estimated. Strictly speaking, because we've broken up this here, which is pacing around the room. So if I highlight that as like green, here's the this. But because it's broken up with this, it means that there's a disconnect grammatically between these two things here. So you need to declare what's happened here. Julia had been I'd flip it around. I'd say Aiden no new paragraph. Aiden ooh, excuse me. I like the trampled snow, but I think you can you can rework it into this first part of the sentence here. But Aiden turned and watched his wife make tracks in the dust of the shop floor. if you want to start a scene that's crashed down from another scene, so we've got a pretty hectic final piece of action here, and then all of a sudden we've got a very quiet scene. You can start off with dialogue, you can suspend the reader's unclear picture of the scene, and in doing so, introduce a bit of, I suppose, grounding. We've been here for too long, I know, there's stuff going on outside. And then immediately after this, you probably want to give the reader a bit more room. Be like, okay, this is kind of like the record scratch. You're probably wondering how I got here. Well, here we go. And if you want to write a story like that, then this is kind of how you have to do it. It's, you got the break. Now we're somewhere else. Here's where we are. You have to do that because if you don't, your reader will just, they'll be reading going, and where are we again? And the less of that you do, the more on side your reader is, which is a good thing. That's a good point. Was this basement their first choice? Sorry, Sayaka, you said I would move even now to the front of that sentence instead of the back. Yes, I agree. Good suggestion. Even now. Which implies at the very front that there's a bit of time that's happened here. Good suggestion, Sayaka. Was the basement at first choice? Nope. Choice of convenience or opportunity. You can weave that in here then. That's up to you. You probably want to make that clear. Considering the intensity of destruction described before, in my mind, most buildings would be collapsed, especially basements, says the real Sayaka. I guess they were on a highway. I don't know how far away they are from the inciting incident. So I'm going to put shop floor here. Some elements, if you want to do this scene break style of events. Address how far away they are from their car, how long they've had to walk, if this basement is their first choice, what's happening outside, how long has it been? These are the sorts of questions that you need to address. You don't have to do it all immediately, but just to keep in mind. Ah, okay. Mechanic is a fair distance from the road. Cool. So they have a goal beyond destruction. I'm up to here now. But wiping us out isn't necessary. I'm assuming aliens here. My mind goes straight to aliens. Does she feel warmer to you? It's a question that's not answered. What do you want? What do you want me to do about it, Jules? Jules? I suggest front-ending the dialogue tag. So instead of, oh, this isn't a dialogue tag, but, you don't necessarily need to make him poisonous, but that's just a suggestion. You can change, like, how the dialogue tags work in terms of where they are, if she's beside Chloe or not. You can give it about it. What do you want me to do, Jules? I mean, what do you want me to say? That becomes a bit redundant here. You could start off poisonous and then get more reasonable, or you could start off reasonable and get more poisonous. That's your choice here, but I'm going to highlight that, orange, and here. Have a think about whether you want me to say. I'll make a comment here. It's nice to have the dialogue flow into new territory instead of repeating the same idea. Yeah, so pick one and then make it a gradient. Cool. Instead of "we can't stay in this basement forever," I might say something like, "We are not going to die in this musty old tomb," but then imply something a bit different. Yeah, it does imply something different, doesn't it? Except this implies that they've seen people die, which is an interesting idea, isn't it? I'll let you think about that one outright. There's a nice implication here, as if "we're not going to die" implies that they've seen other people die, or that they know that they are going to die unless something happens. Different kind of baggage to it. That hammering was relentless, unforgiving. There was no pattern to it, no getting used to it. Sinister ruination, a hell drum without rhythm or cadence. I'm gonna suggest cutting the run-off sentence here. So there was no pattern to it, no getting used to its sinister ruination. That's kind of how you'd soothe it into a full sentence. Otherwise, a hell drum without rhythm or cadence is a run-on phrase that should be attached here. Yeah, maybe just consider sort of stitching it together into two different sentences, or stitching it apart and making it two different sentences. Yeah, that's an interesting suggestion, Sayaka. So without pattern, without pattern, no getting used to its sinister ruination, unrepeatable noises. You probably have to change how these two sentences work if you want to say without pattern. I agree, I like without pattern. There's no pattern to it, functions as a sentence opener though, so you need to change that around. That hammering was relentless, unforgiving, there was no pattern to it. Or you could say, how about this? And then there was no getting used to its sinister ruination, the whale. A hell drum without. So there was no getting used to its sinister ruination, an orchestra, whale, and repeat. A hell drum without rhythm or cadence. You can pick one of these two, or you could run them together for a bit of a wordy sentence. There was no getting used to its sinister ruination, an orchestral wail on repeat, a hell drum without rhythm or cadence. Take the dialogue tag and stick it here. As Julia said, waving her hand back and forth, comma, Julia said, comma. Get her to repeat the problem back. I don't know what we need to do. But are we really going to spend another night trapped in this tomb? We've cut it back down to 2. I think that's okay. Hey, yes, that's right. So before there was something grammatically incorrect with here, which needed a comma, but I just moved it around. So the moment something, anything, I don't know. I heard to make it a little more intense than murmuring seemed to benefit them said. Yep, muttering could work. Let's think of a list of stuff. My go-to is always murmured. People murmur a lot. In quiet, close conversation with people, there's a lot of murmuring. Very rarely will it be shouting or stammering. Pressed. Eased. Even suggested. Lots of dialogue tags. Pick one. Grumbled, complained, also good. Whined, even better. Maybe not whined. Whined is probably not. No. No, not whined. Grumbled, complained. You don't want to make it whingy, you know. You want to make it reasonable, I think, what she's doing. Pressed might be the strongest you could use in terms of her being forceful. Murmured, muttered is probably the most soft, I guess. Yep. Ah, okay. Here's the... I think when people talk about said, here's what they usually mean when they don't want you to write said. Quickly. Okay, here's what people say about like the whole said thing. Hey Sekoj, welcome back to the stream. Good to see yourself and your fine duckies back in my chat box. Yep, Sayaka's picked up on. Damn, you're beating me to all the juicy points, Sayaka. I should just ban you, time you out. When someone asks a good question, I'll be like. Gotta crack down on Sayaka before they deliver the goods. But you're totally right. Like it's, I don't like using said because it's a missed opportunity. Here's why people suggest probably not using. Don't use all the extra fancy words. It's because people often write the dialogue like this. Quickly, Hermione flabbergasted. Do this? No, Ron wailed. That's not what I want to do. Blah 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 blah. Hermione screamed. The simple solution here is to not write dialogue like this. And then you have the added advantage of being able to use better words when you front end the dialogue tag. In fact, it's very important that you establish through the use of this word here the tone of what your character says. Compare these two sentences. In almost every circumstance of dialogue, I can recommend that you front end the dialogue tag. There's almost nothing to be gained by blah 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 blah, said a character. Especially if you need to tell us the tone of how the dialogue is delivered. In each example here, you have the huge advantage of being able to sow the seeds for what the character sounds like in the reader's head. Julia ran her hand across her forehead and murmured, "It's just that I feel like we're gonna die here." Julia rolled her eyes and moaned, "Oh, I feel like we're gonna die here." Julia looked out the window and said, "I feel like we're gonna die here." Said in this case really only works if we've got like X, Y, Z's worth of body language that describes how Julia feels. Said can be a really great dialogue opener if you understand intuitively what the character's feeling. Just as good, though, is probably a short and simple, sweet word. Murmured, moaned, something that's indicative of tone. So yeah, I think the reason why people were saying, like, said's overused. Oh no, sorry. There's a stigma with using anything but said. I think that's really more has to do with how people write dialogue rather than the words said. Or the words that aren't said. Like with the Harry Potter example. Which was what I had some time before. But yeah. Don't like, J.K. Rowling doesn't write like that. That's not what I was going for. It's just that style of, not J.K.'s style of writing. It's a hypothetical style of writing where people misuse dialogue tags. Yep. It's alright, Sayaka. I'm reading the I'm so sorry, senpai. I'll forgive you. That's an interesting point, Psychology. Like, who was it who said's kind of ignored? A good point too. You don't even need dialogue tags sometimes. Yeah, just try it. Give it a go. See how it fits into the writing style that you have. If you can confidently pull off a back-end dialogue tag, I'd be happy with that. But I personally think, as an editor, it's a lot stronger to see someone up front prepare you for speech and then deliver it. This is quite an abrupt tone change here. Quite an abrupt tone change here between I think that there's a really this is an easy fix. So introduce a few sentences of frostiness or calm, and then have one of the characters bridge it. They obviously have quite a good, strong relationship, which is really nice. Even under pressure, they're managing to form good connections, which is good to see. Yeah, I mean, it was technically 2 days. Technically, it was 2 days. Yep. Technically, it was 2 days. It sounds more like natural dialogue. Good suggestion, Sayaka. I'm gonna ban you. With all of your good suggestions. Down comes the ban hammer. You're being too useful. Or it was only 2 days. Oh my goodness, yes, yes. Oof. Experimental. I don't know if that's good. What Sekoch was saying, like, dialogue tags, who needs that? If you've got a scene with more than 2 characters, yeah, you probably need dialogue tags. Really, no possessives. No possessives? Oh no quotes. I haven't watched it. A friend of mine was talking about The Expanse. She said she really likes it. One of Australia's most famous books doesn't have quotation marks in it. Does it make the story better? No, but it works without them. It's okay. It's like a fantastic story, but just in terms of the quote marks, its absence doesn't make it better. Thank you, Sakura. That's what I want from my viewers. I just want blathering and shit posting and Shrek posting. None of that useful suggestions. None of those concise edits. Just low quality trash. That's what I'm after. I think that's the point of it too. Yeah, OutriderSG. I think what it does instead, for me at least, is just makes me think, wherever die? Oh, that's right, there aren't any. Every time. I don't know. It's good to try something experimental, yeah. Right, exactly. If it's not done properly, then it's a nightmare. Because you have to roll back and see if it's, one or the other. A good author will differentiate too, in different ways. Yep. So I suggest here adding a couple of sentences between um mm, sorry. People are chatting. No, sorry. That's okay, so Kodge. I should have introduced the story to you. Yes, it's OutriderSG story. You're talking about the chocolate here. Let's come to that in a tick. I'll tell you what I've done here. Are we really going to spend another night trapped in this tomb? Aiden shook his head. Was feeling shook then. I can't kind of shook twice. The ceiling shook then, and another white layer of dust came clean from the roofing. Excuse me, and my poor writing. My mistake. Julia gave a deep sigh and sat down beside Chloe, her eyes nowhere. And in the silence that followed, a thought came across Aiden's mind, something good, something warm. He felt the swell of it touch his heart, and he laughed once, soft. Or laughed soft once. He even put something good, something warm as its own sentence. With a little smile across his face, the man recalled, too, mate, do you remember a few years back? Our last trip to your brother's. He ended up stuck in his spare room for 3 days. Her voice had a welcome ease to it. Is quite nice. I want to keep that. It's declarative and it's telling you a detail. I don't mind though. I think it's cool. Her voice had a welcome ease to it. Yeah, I mean, technically it was only 2 days. You've got remember. So just cut out the remember here. We heard Mason banging Little Miss Yoga Pants. I think it's a really funny description of someone. I don't know why, but yeah. It's one of those things that has so much character and connotation built into it. It's really interesting to see. Checked into that hotel number last night, so I'm assuming so here Aiden probably needs to move from one side of the room to the other to meet Julia. And so just introduce a bit of motion there. So his voice took on a welcoming ease. Yeah. Her voice calm as she continued her thought. Her voice had welcoming ease to it. Yeah, I mean, Okay, here we go. Chocolate hair. Aiden reached out to brush the hair from Julia's face, gently tucking the chocolate strands behind her ear. Every so often the distant pounding would unsettle debris from the ceiling. It was a trivial thing, but Aiden could tell that it was bothering her. I'm gonna put the word outside here so that it removes the connotation of sex noise from pounding. Every so often the distant pounding outside would unsettle debris from the ceiling. It was a trivial thing, but Aiden could tell that it was bothering her. Which one here is the trivial thing? If it's the chocolate strand behind the ear, like removing it from her eyes, like that? Or is it the pounding outside? What does the ear refer to? Just a little clarification there. Yeah, there's. I think in terms of like what happens here structurally, um, it seems like there are a few points where there's a bit of missing tape. Like characters are doing things around each other, and then all of a sudden they'll kind of not teleport around the scene. It's not that sort of jagged or anything. But I think you're right. Like there are details like you imagine that she's pacing, but then there's no word confirmation here. I think my recommendation to you is to you can slow the scene down a little bit. You'll notice that I added a lot here, a lot. But in terms of the pacing of how things transition and how things work, how characters move around, take your time. I find myself saying this quite a lot on my edits, but write more. I've never encountered a story, at least on my channel, where there's been such extraneous detail that I've needed to say cut, 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 cut. I'm always telling people to write more, and that's because of this. It's we need a bit of meat on the bones of the story. We need a bit of slowness to it. So just write more. You don't like. There comes a point where it's excessive and it's a bit too much, but especially for things like what you're saying here, put those details in. Mm-hmm. Yep. Good question. The debris, was that my suggestion here? I've got dust. Where's debris? Debris. I'll let OutriderSG traces of plastic and dust. I think if you're going to get more specific than debris, you probably want to go a bit more poetic. So every so often, a distant pounding outside would unsettle a fine layer of dusty motes from the ceiling. Did I misspell dusty? Did I misspell motes? No, Google. It's for children who are wrong. Am I so out of touch with spelling? Yeah, so just have a think about what the it is, because if it's one and not the other, then it's a bit funny that it goes from image 1, image 2, and then we've got this it. Unless you're trying to purposefully double them together, but I'm not sure if that's working here. She reached up her hand against his neck and nudged his forehead against hers. That's quite nice. They lingered, leaning, listening. He's, I'm not a huge fan of the alliteration, especially because of lingered, but I can't really think of a better way to phrase all of that. I think that's more personal preference, so you can leave that in. He skimmed her cheek with his thumb. He skimmed her cheek with his thumb and ran it across the subtle bronze of her bottom lip. She tilted her head back, allowed his lips to fall against hers, and Ada felt his worries drift away. That's nice. That's right. Aiden said, the ghost of a smile on his face. Yoga pants, I forgot about her. When I first read, that's right, Aiden said, I kind of thought it sounded almost like he's coercing her a bit. So to get rid of that implication, you can add a transition sentence like bring her close, bring her deep into his chest, and held her tight. Or just Aiden let the memory of an awful trip play out before his mind once more. That's right. I mean, here you don't need to say Aiden said. And the ghost of a smile on his face. You can just have like, that's right, full stop. Yoga pants, I forgot about it, huh, Julia said. I'm sure you have. Chloe was cooing but remained otherwise quiet. Okay, so... I think this might be a bit late for me to suggest, but... excuse me. We need to know where Chloe is, and I forgot to mention that before. Chloe resting in a milk crate. It's important to establish where she is. Yeah, I think it's important to establish where she is. Cool. Mm-hmm. Whoa, she's holding her the whole time. Okay, yeah. Yeah, cool. Nice. Yeah, exactly. A throwaway line would fix it, like up here in the milk crate. However, if you want to do that, you then need to be careful with the jacket scene as well, because currently we don't know that she's wrapped up in the folds of the jacket that came down here. So you have to be very careful about grounding the objects in your scene very well, otherwise, like, you read a scene like this where they get close and kiss each other, and then down here you're like, hey, P.S. the baby she's been holding all of this time is in her arms, and you're like, whoa, where did that come from? We talked about this recently as well in actually even from the very first stream. I love mentioning this story, so you know, if you've heard this story before, strap yourself in because we're doing it again. But this comes up quite a bit when authors don't introduce important items or objects. I called it the black bag thing, because in the very first story I edited over Twitch, this happened to a character who had this very important magic black bag, and for whatever reason we didn't see it for the first like 1,000 words, and then all of a sudden a character is holding a bag and pulling something from it. Recently I reiterated that with talking about Scarface and his parrot. You can spend a whole scene talking about Scarface walking around a room and intimidating people, and then at the end of it, if you say, Scarface stroked the elaborate feathers of his parrot that was on his shoulder that whole time, it makes the reader be like, wait, hang on, he had a parrot on his the whole time, the whole scene? Well, why didn't we see it earlier? Why didn't we see it earlier? If it's important, ground it early. Sucks. Well, I hope that was a nice bedtime story. The story of Scarface and his parrot. I've told it better in the past too. Like, I think the first time that came up, I told a whole story about Scarface walking around a room and intimidating people. Yeah. But the takeaway is that you need to think about what characters are doing, who they're interacting with, and what objects they're interacting with. It's very important. Yeah, please do. It's a good example that we've been dealing with a bit. Yeah, do. It's a good illustration, I think. It can be annoying, especially if it feels like you're doing it for the sake of doing it, right? That can feel as though it's artificial. I understand what you mean. The trick is to just try and organically weave in the important elements and objects at the very... not strictly at the very start of the scene, but you want to avoid bringing up new information in the room that they're in. The further or the more time you spend in that room. It's a timing thing, right? As soon as you introduce a character in a setting, there's like a clock of believability that you need to be aware of. It's a totally intuitive thing. You have to be a bit sort of subjective about it, I guess. So yeah, Chloe was cooing but remained otherwise quiet. We need to think of a transition. it's nice to see characters treating each other well in a stressful situation. I think there's always the temptation in these sorts of stories to have people just crack and break apart. That's why I really like A Quiet Place, because it's a super stressful situation they're all in. It's so stressful. And yet there are these really nice moments of just nice things. Yeah. So I like to see that incorporated in stories, like the human moments. It may come across as a bit artificial in terms of like how it suddenly veers into this very happy place. But to be honest, they've been here for ages. After a while, you just kind of the fear would subside and something very human would rise out of it. And so I like the fact that just instead of this being dragged down in, oh, well, what are we going to do? This is all your fault. We should have da da da. No, shut up. We shouldn't have done that. There's a little bit of that, which is normal, and then there's the nice element to it. It's nice. I like it. So where were we? Have a think of a transition here between coming out of this nice scene and back into reality. So, well, for example, a mage pulled up a magical orb from his bag. Do I have to mention that the mage has an orb? Or it just goes with the flow, since he is a mage? You can make him conjure it from nowhere. Like, he's got this sort of infinite space that he can access, and he just sort of makes a hand movement and pulls out a bag from thin air. And from that bag, he can then open up an orb. So, for example, that's a way that if you can get around having to constantly have people with backpacks and bags, then I think where this is difficult is if... I don't know why I'm thinking of Aragon tonight, but for some reason I'm thinking of Aragon, and I'm thinking about how they have to move up quite a lot of stuff from A to B on their horses' backs, for instance, or on Saphira's packs or something. It gets a bit, I suppose, tedious for the writer to be like, okay, hey, by the way, he's got a backpack, he slings it off his shoulder, a couple of scenes later, okay, his backpack's on, it's jangling on his shoulders, okay, now he's reaching into his back. Like, it becomes more like an inventory at that point, and I feel for writers who have to deal with characters dragging around things, or important objects that could be important for later. It's hard to do. You just have to kind of keep at it and gauge feedback from your beta readers about whether or not stuff pops into existence. Like, oh wait, that's right, he had a rucksack on. Yeah, that's right, I remember that from the last scene. Or it could be too much of the other direction. Like, okay, we get it, he's wearing a backpack. You know, it's very slippery, isn't it, in terms of how much is too much. It was as though she understood they needed that moment. Aiden pressed the back of his hand to her forehead, definitely warmer. It was as though she understood they needed that moment. I would demonstrate this rather than declare it. Also, I'm not a fan of the it was as though she, it was as though. This is one of those sort of types of phrases that you can just say directly, like, she understood. It was as though she understood. I get why it's there though. Regardless, I think if you got rid of that, and Chloe was cooing but remained otherwise quiet, as if... I'm not really sure how to weave that back in. Chloe was cooing, but remained otherwise quiet. I'd demonstrate it. Calm with her eyes. Chloe was screaming but remained otherwise quiet, calm, with her eyes only for her parents, just watching, intent. This demonstrates the same thing that implies, I think. You can have to think about how to work in a demonstration of this idea here. Comment. Have a think about how you might like to demonstrate this idea by showing what a character is doing, not going, what a character is doing at that moment. Sometimes simple things can have that sort of flow on. Ah, thank you, yes, but otherwise remain quiet. Yep, that's a good suggestion, just swap it around. That's nice. Those things. What do you mean, Zyka, about those things? Aiden press the back of his hand. This is a good opportunity to re-establish. Ah, cool. Keep reading. Good opportunity to re-establish where Chloe is in regards to maybe you can make Julia pick Chloe up into her arms in prep for the upcoming scene. Worst right, Julia asked, the calm gone from her voice. This is okay back-ended because it's so short at the front here, the calm gone from her voice. You see, Julia, if you reordered this sentence, Julia came close into her husband and asked, comma, all the calm gone from her voice, comma, worse, right? We know what it sounds like. Worse, right? Julia asked, the calm gone from her voice. It's fine too, but imagine this. Worse, right? I think she's about to reach a high fever, and that means we need to move, Julia said, the calm gone from her voice. The longer this is, the less ground you have for the dialogue tag to work. You need to really make sure that if you back end the dialogue, the front needs to be short. That's my recommendation. What are you referring to here outside SG? Sorry. Sorry, I've was in my own little world there. Are you guys talking about oh, something that comes like yep. We already tried that, Jules. Comma. Aiden's said, pointing toward the bedlam in the distance, beyond the window. Beyond the high window. If you want to, in the distance, if you like, earlier on in this scene, you can get Aiden to look out the window and get the narrator to describe what's outside. Actually, I do recommend this. It's important for the setting. I like, on one hand, the claustrophobia we have about, all we know about this scene is that it's in a basement, but I think having a little bit of grounding outside would also help us too. Ah, okay, cool. I'll get to it in a second, I think. If you find an example of it, when you said let me scroll up, tell me where it is, and I'll Change my comment. Those things swooped in so damn quick. If it weren't for the cover of the trees, we'd be dead. Chloe would be dead. I think things is good. Remember that 2.5 days have passed, so they would have, or I don't know, two and a bit. They would have already gotten over that initial phase of like, what exactly were those like things? How do you describe them? Well, they kind of like X, Y, Z. And I guess after a while, they probably just refer to it as things. I think that's okay. I like that mystery. I kind of want to know, like, we've been into the story a little bit by now, but at the same time, I'm happy just to let it slide. But other people may want to know at this point. My opinion is that you can get by with the mystery. Next paragraph, right? I know it's. Well, I know it's hell out there, he said. What if they catch us out in the open? Aiden knew she was right though. Just be careful with the pronouns here to make sure that the structure of the paragraph was okay. I just prefer like Aiden knew she was right though. They couldn't stay. He stared off into the distance through the tiny window. A storm of lightning cracked across the evening sky, starting to in which case I think I can delete this comment. Oh, maybe move it up, yeah. So consider moving this up. So you consider this up. Even the paragraph before. Just so that we have a painting in our mind to project onto, if that makes sense. I'm curious to see how it happened too. Aiden! His eyes found hers. She was staring him down, awaiting a response to a question that he had allowed to go unanswered. Babe, her tone shifted now. Okay, I see what happened here. This is, if you want this to work, consider making the previous section longer. The more time we spend lost in thought, the more that a line like this becomes justified. Within reason, of course. Right now it's a bit short. In fact, when I first read this, and when I read it again, it sounds like something bad has happened. Like, Aiden, we're gonna die. But even adding a second Aiden would help clarify the difference between Aiden, there's something at the window, or like Aiden, there's something crawling out of the air conditioner, versus Aiden, which intuitively implies that he has let a question go unanswered. Awaiting a response to a question left unanswered. Ooh, that's clean. Awaiting a response to a question left unanswered. It's nice when you can just get rid of a whole mouthful of words with a single one. That's nice. Aiden rubbed his eyes can be a symbol of him being tired. A bit of body language can help as well. Babe, her tone shifted now, calm and polite, more dismissive than anything else. You know what? Fine. We go first thing in the morning. Okay. There'd be no stopping her, he knew. Never mind the fact that it would put his wife and daughter in harm's way. He felt the chill of her stare. Okay, first thing, he said. For now, let's try to get some sleep. So we continued to fusion as Julia slumped onto a pile of pallets. She was wearing Aiden's jacket. Have a think about where to introduce this fact. Start of the scene? bit earlier. But if you leave it too late, it pops into existence. And the reader is now forced to reimagine the scene they have just read, but with the less you do that, the better. The less like, hey, P.S. she's been wearing a jacket all this time. Yeah, the less you do that, the better. And then when it finally comes to the jacket making sense, we're primed for it. That's right, yeah, they pulled it from the car, didn't they? Hmm. I think it should be sooner, yeah. Um, Especially with the pallets as well. Ditto with the pallets. Establish this earlier. When we're first introduced to the scene. So for instance, I go way back up here. Julie broke away from the pattern, from her pattern, and made her way back to Chloe resting in a milk crate. Here you can introduce the jacket and the milk, sorry, and the pallets that they're sleeping on. All it takes is like a sentence or two, and we have that information primed in our minds and all the implications that come with it. Then later on, when the narrator mentions the jacket again, the reader's like, oh yeah, that's right, she was wearing a jacket. Those types of little details sprinkled in really help everything in terms of how it flows together. She bundled Chloe into the folds should be describe describe Chloe being picked up. So describe the motion of it. There's lots of potential here for you to describe the way in which she picks Chloe up, the care that she affords both her jacket and her daughter, the way it all sort of unifies in a really loving kind of gesture. It's a really nice way to demonstrate what I was talking about before, about the love that she shows for the jacket and Chloe. The fact that it's good enough to keep her daughter warm. If you don't mind, I might call that I might call it there. Let's put a mark. It was more comfort. I'm gonna stop, and next time we'll continue on from this point on page wherever we are. Sadness, despair. Good. Excellent. I stream, the next stream is scheduled for this Sunday, 9 AM my time, so like 12 hours from when I usually start. So let me know if you can make it. Otherwise, you're more than welcome to just watch the replay at your own leisure. Sad anime hole. You can also go to my Discord too. Hint, join my Discord. People who are lurking, join my Discord. The link to it is on the my Twitch homepage. I'll have to work my trust back into your heart, Sekoj. I promise I'll be there on Sunday. Unless something happens, in which case I won't be there. But I'll let you know. Sunday isn't a lie, Clem. I swear it's not a lie. It's a little lie sometimes. Saturday at the evening. Ah, yeah, that's right. Oh, it's better than like 3 a.m. Yay! Excellent. Good. I know it's trust over the internet is a difficult thing. Very difficult thing. Australia is a lie, not Sunday. Cool. So I'll just make a little wrap up here. Between now and Sunday's stream, I'll have a think about the place of this prologue and how it operates. I'll especially have a think about how this first section here fits in with the second section. I really like how slow and tender and nice this second section is. The characters have a good rapport with each other. It's interesting, I think. I'll just sort of give some thought as to the nature of how the prologue fits together with its different elements, and maybe we can come to a bit of a conclusion about how it should be structured. But for what it's worth, I really like what's gone on in this second part here. I'm curious, like, I feel like these are characters that I actually want to root for. I want to see where they go, and I want to see how they survived and what the monsters are. I'm invested, and that's good. That's very good. So yeah, thanks Outrider for allowing me to edit this. If you've got any questions, send me an email or in Discord. Hit me up and we can have a chat. But yeah. Yes, that's right, Liberta. She's a classy lurker, which is totally fine. You can enjoy live edits without even saying a word. Yeah, my pleasure. No, it's good fun. I really enjoy what I do, so yeah. Thank you. Alrighty, we'll see you all on Sunday. Yes. Very good. Okay, have a good couple of days, everyone. We'll see you then.